Joel Klatt, the voice of college football, joining us on a Wednesday as he is prone to do. The Klattmeister joining us. All right. Oh, I'm very good. You got UCLA Penn State Saturday at noon.
Yes.
So I want to start with this. Bama, Georgia. I always have this feeling that when you jump out to a huge lead and then you surrender a good part of the lead, you've won the game, but it's hard to sell your team at halftime. Play with the same intensity as you did.
Okay.
I thought Kalen DeBoer crushed it. I don't think he's Saban the recruiter. I think at Washington.
Well, he's recruiting great right now.
Well, it's Alabama. That helps. Everybody, like Clay Helton recruited okay at USC. Everybody recruits.
I mean, did he?
Yeah, pretty well.
When he got fired, they had like the 65th ranked class.
Well, Paul
Hackett,
see,
I think you're like DeBoer's a very good recruiter.
Well, Washington, it was.
I mean, look at some of those players that they had. Remember, recruiting guys to stay is just as important when you go there. He was there for 2 years. He recruited guys to stay. He got Ryan Williams to commit this year because Ryan Williams decommitted after Saban ended up retiring.
Alabama.
I understand that, but he's got right now in next year's recruiting class, Alabama has the highest average rating for a player of anybody in the country, and they're the number 2 class in the country right behind Ohio State. So he's out recruiting Kirby Smart right now in his own conference. He just beat Kirby Smart. So I don't know if it's fair to say like he's not a great recruiter. I think he's actually a very good recruiter.
I think he's the best. I think he develops players almost like nobody I've ever seen. I mean, I thought Michael Penix in Indiana was interesting. I watched him at Washington, and I'm like, what am I watching?
Yeah, he finds a way. Here's where this is where I would agree with you. Whether he's developing specifically the quarterback or he's molding the offense to take advantage of what the quarterback can do best. He does those two things as well as anybody in the country. He won with a dual threat quarterback when he was at Sioux Falls and won a national championship. Michael Penix turns into the best deep ball thrower I've seen in college football maybe ever last season. And now he's gotten Jalen Milroe, and you got to credit Milroe too because he's obviously committed himself to becoming a much better player.
Oh, no, Milroe is a different player today.
No doubt.
I mean, last year you watched him. I didn't even think NFL. I would argue he could be a first pick in the draft.
Well, he's clearly the most dynamic player on the field. When he's on the field, he's just the most dynamic player on the field.
And throws a beautiful deep ball.
And he's starting to become a much better thrower. Here's where Jalen Milroe needs to continue to develop, and Kalen DeBoer will get him here. Okay, so if you just take last year's numbers, and he's a little bit better this year, but if you take last year's numbers, he was a top 5 quarterback, Jalen Milroe was, throwing the ball down the field. 15 yards or more down the field. At the line of scrimmage, top 5 quarterback. Anything intermediate, he was about 90th. Okay, so why? Why the disparity there? Because it can't just be offensive structure. Something was going on. Well, here's where it comes into play. And quarterbacks will generally know this. If you're throwing the ball deep down the field, that's widely a pre-snap decision. Or you're taking the entire progression out and you're saying, okay, I've got an alert, I've got a deep shot or a check down. So you're minimizing what the entirety of the offense is. And if you're throwing it deep, it's usually a pre-snap decision. Same thing for at the line of scrimmage. If you're going to throw something shorter than 5 yards, that is a pre-snap decision based on alignment and structure of the defense. So pre-snap, top 5 quarterback in college football, throwing the ball last year. Intermediate, 90th. All the intermediate zone passing is post-snap decisions. It's reading progressions. It's reading zone movement keys. It's controlling the game from the pocket. That's where he needed to develop the most. And I've started to see this year him develop in that area, which makes him much more of a viable quarterback threat, not only this year for Alabama, but for the NFL. He's been tremendous. And that game plan early was incredibly efficient, obviously, for Alabama.
So what are we to make of Colorado? Now, I will argue I could see the first player being taken in the draft being Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders being the second. I mean, that's possible. That's on the radar.
Because he's a quarterback. That is possible.
Yeah, I mean, Travis, I mean, if you were going to start a program and I said you get 2 great players, a quarterback and a guy that can play both ways and score touchdowns for both, you'd want that.
If you just did that thing with the NFL, like if you're drafting in college football right now for a college football team, a non-quarterback, Travis Hunter is by far the first player that you would take.
So what do I make of them now after last weekend?
So Colorado beats UCF last week, and they were about 14-point dogs.
Yeah.
And then they go out there and smoke them by, what was it, 28?
So basically
they beat Vegas by, 42 points, which is wild. Now, here's what is wild is that it was as balanced and complete a victory as Colorado has had as a program in well over 2 decades. Certainly the best performance that they've ever had under Deion Sanders. And here's the difference, Colin, is that defensively in their front, they're actually playing legitimate defense. UCF was the #1 rush team in the country, and they held UCF to under 200 yards rushing. They were averaging 375 coming in. So their defensive front is much better, and all of a sudden they start running the ball. Do you know how? This was wild, and I'm going to nerd out for a second. This is what I love about in-season adjustments and development from a program. And this, by the way, is going to go to show you, like, how good of an actual football coach Deion Sanders is, and his offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur. They were primarily in 10 personnel up until last week. Do you know what 10 personnel is? 1 back, 0 tight ends, 4 wide receivers. When you're in that personnel group, Colin, it's incredibly difficult to run the football because you can't control the edges of the defensive line and you can't create conflict on the linebackers because it's just right in front of them. All you can do is zone, zone, zone. There's no pullers. There's no misdirection. The run game is very stale in 10 personnel. So they moved to 11 personnel. So they were about 80% 10 personnel before UCF. In the UCF game, 11 personnel 80% of the time. 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. Guess what that 1 tight end gives you the ability to do? Widen the edges, control the edges in the run game. So now you can chop down the edge, whether you're spinning him back or keeping him front side, and you can run gap and power schemes, pulling guards, pulling that tight end, and you can create conflict on those linebackers because now they have to defend counter. They've got to defend gap schemes like pulling guards, and it's more difficult for them. Once you do that, now you can throw the football when you want to rather than when you have to, which is what they did. The other thing that the 11 personnel formation did for them is it created some width on the offensive line. So guess what Shedeur didn't have to deal with? Edge pressure in his face right away because it was a further edge. You just moved the defensive end out a little bit. So that small change in personnel and schematics from Colorado made their offense far more difficult to defend. If they stick with that and continue to develop their run game, continue to develop this 11 personnel package, they could plausibly, at their ceiling, beat anybody in the Big 12. So that's why last weekend was such a massive game, not just for Colorado, but for the entire conference and maybe even the country. And it should shut up all those naysayers about, like, he's only flash, Deion can't coach, he's a marketer. Really? Because that adjustment and what they did was schematic brilliance, and I loved it.
Have they faced Utah yet or any good teams?
The Utah team that lost to Arizona at home on Saturday?
Could go either way. Okay.
You
Big Ten.
You didn't say fake idea of college football today.
Nice win, but let's get to the big boy.
They beat Vegas by 42.
Vegas. Okay. Do they play a car dealership, a casino, or a football team?
Wow.
Okay. So right now it's the merging of the Pac-12 formerly and the Big Ten. And I just throw this out there. I heard a lot about this. Oh, those California teams when it gets cold. You know what I saw this weekend? Wisconsin wilt in the heat. Wisconsin literally just were like, it is hot out here. We've never seen the sun. Has anybody ever considered?
That is such an outlandish take.
So when they boxed Wisconsin 28-0 second half.
Like it never gets hot in Wisconsin?
Not a lot.
You act like there's some sort of heat wave. It was 76 degrees in L.A.
That's my point.
Like, what do you mean?
Wisconsin comes out here. Everybody gets a sunburn that has a Badger hat on, and the team wilts on the field in L.A. So I'm just saying, I'm watching USC. You're gonna beat Minnesota this weekend. Come back and beat Penn State. And
wow, you got them beating Penn State.
Penn State traveled 3,000 miles. You know what that does to college kids? NFL guys don't care.
Okay, interesting.
So my take is USC is really young offensively. Michigan was a terrible matchup because they have the 2 best defensive linemen in the country. It was a terrible matchup.
It was.
And USC, again, freshman and sophomore, go on the road, big house. They come back home. Again, they're sloppy.
I mean, they played terrible in the first half. Well, 3 turnovers. Wisconsin's got the lead.
Yeah, young people make mistakes. But when the young people have way more talent, they pulled away and dominated. My point is, USC, we all sold our stock.
No. I won't sell stock in USC. I'm with you on this. Like, listen, I know I'm bantering with you a little bit. I'm not selling my stock in USC. In fact, tomorrow I'll be releasing an episode of my podcast where I do a revised prediction of a college football playoff bracket. Maybe they're in it.
Wow.
Maybe they're in it.
Well,
I don't know if Penn State's a great matchup for them. Because of a defender named Abdul Carter.
He's crazy.
He's a phenomenal defender,
Yeah.
and their inability to protect the passer could come to haunt them, even when at home Penn State comes out to Los Angeles.
We was just talking with a friend last night. He's unblockable, so I know USC can't block him. That's their struggle. They had their tackles are kids.
That's right.
That's interesting.
I like USC, though. I think that even if they were to lose to Penn State, think about it this way. Even if they were to lose to Penn State, and they could roll off a bit of a win streak and beat Notre Dame at the end of the year, I think that would be, if I'm not mistaken, that would be 6 straight wins to end the season. They would be 10-2. Now you go to the SEC, and you start thinking about how the SEC can kind of play out. Well, if LSU can get on a little bit of a run, like let's say they beat Ole Miss at home at night, which is not out of the question. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, like, they beat an Oklahoma team that's struggling on offense. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you can get LSU to 10-2, 7-1 in the SEC. Well, if LSU is 10-2, 7-1 in the SEC, they will be on the doorstep of the SEC championship game, and everybody will be clamoring for them to be where, Colin? In the college football playoff. If they're in the college football playoff, what happens to that 10-2 Big Ten team that beat them in week 1? They're in the college football playoff. You can get SC, even with a Penn State loss, you can get SC very close to the playoff, if not definitely in the playoff.
How about this one? I watched Arch Manning so far this year.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, and there's a percentage of people, and this is America, we love celebs, we cut him down, that are rooting against him. Because Manning. It's sad because he's a great kid, great family. I'm sure you know him, we know him.
Yeah.
I watch Arch Manning, and I got to give this kid credit. He would start for virtually every other college team in America.
There's no question.
Like, I mean, Texas
he probably doesn't start at Colorado and Texas.
That's it.
And that might be it. And maybe Alabama because of Jalen Milroe.
But every other kid's transferring, and he hasn't set a peep.
Yeah.
And he's a Manning.
Yeah. So I think that the future of football is so bright. I think in 10 years, if you're still doing this, we're going to be talking about an incredible NFL Sunday matchup between Arch Manning and Dylan Raiola. Like, there are some young players, and I still consider him to be young because he's inexperienced.
He is.
Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. Like, there are some, maybe Jalen Milroe. There are some players in college football that Shedeur Sanders, like, we're going to be watching these guys for a long time. Manning's one of them, whether he's the starter at Texas or not. And Ewers is their starter, and he's going to be their starter, and they want him back, and he's their leader. But Arch has solidified them as a bona fide national championship contender because now it doesn't matter if their quarterback stays healthy.
That's right.
They're still a premier team in the country with him at quarterback.
Oh, they could win the national championship with Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers.
I think that's true.
I think
that's absolutely right. By the way, that's not even the wide receivers that are young in the country. I know you brought up Manning, but think about, like, 10 years from now, we could be seeing a Manning-Raiola, NFL matchup, and one of them might have Ryan Williams on his team or Jeremiah Smith, these two freshmen wide receiver from Ohio State, Jeremiah Smith, and Ryan Williams, the true freshman at Alabama. The young players in our sport right now are incredible, and it makes me incredibly excited for the future of our sport.
I just love, and everybody's going to say, well, he's a Manning. He doesn't need to, transfer for money. Yeah, like Peyton Manning is just, sending his brothers all his cash. The truth of the matter is it takes a certain value system and patience and maturity to not run when things go sideways or you don't get what you want.
That family will know, and I have been told by those around, not directly by them, but those around them, they understand two truths about developing quarterbacks for the long run. One is, don't play too early, in particular in college, because you can be ruined. So he went there with the objective to develop for a couple of years without being the starter. That was the objective at Texas, under a guy that's going to teach him an NFL-style of system that'll be good for him long-term. That's Steve Sarkisian. So that's number one. Number two will be, the more reps that you get in college, the better your success is likely to be in the NFL.
That's true.
I've been through this with you on your show. If you look at the guys that have won Super Bowls since Tom Brady won his first Super Bowl, all the way back the turn of the century, in 2000, you will see that on average, the quarterbacks that are winning Super Bowls in the NFL stayed for about 36 or more starts in college football, their college career, just average out their college career. They attempted well over 1,400 passes. A lot of them have over 50 to 60 touchdown passes, 900 completions. What do you see? Experience. Why is Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix having a lot of success? They're experienced players. They have been on a football field for more snaps than others. And that's, I think, how you start to have success long-term. And they know that about Arch.
By the way, I'm not banging on transfers because Jaden went from a meh program to LSU. But Arch is it a program where he would start for everybody else in the country.
And he'll start next year.
Yeah, but I like the idea of, hey, man, I'm this, and it's just, I'm going to sit and learn. It's just smart. I see guys transfer, and many of the
by the way, Steve Sarkisian isn't at other places.
Yeah.
Right? So, fine, transfer. Where? Now, I mean, not saying that there aren't some other places you could go and really get developed as an NFL passer. Yeah. Ohio State might be one of those. Yeah. There's some others out there, and this is going to seem like a knock, and maybe it is, but where are you going to go? Like Auburn? That's a dumpster fire right now offensively.
Yeah.
So it's also, who are you being taught by? And you could make the argument that even as a backup, Arch is being developed better for his long-term success as a quarterback under Steve Sarkisian than going to start for Joe whatever at name of the college.
1 year ago, I talked to Miller Moss at USC, and he was not considering transferring, but he knew he wasn't going to play much. And I said, I said to him, if you have to sit behind Caleb and learn from Lincoln, that's not terrible.
No.
And that was his take. It's like, he goes, I'm getting so much smarter than I would other places. So it's like, if you have the right boss, I always say this, don't chase money. There's a sea of it. Chase the right boss or management. There's a finite number of great. If I can get Sark, I would sit under Sark than have a defensive coach playing for a team that's 500 and getting a bunch of reps.
Yeah, and running some very college-oriented offense versus an NFL-oriented offense. And we've also seen guys take some time to develop in college and then late in their careers become incredible quarterbacks in college. I'm thinking of, like, Kyler was this way at Oklahoma. Joe Burrow was this way. These guys that sat for a period and then found themselves at a place to have really high success. Jaden Daniels is one of those.
Yeah, transferring's not bad.
It's not bad, but you got to be in a position to succeed based on who you're playing for and what systems you're going to run. If I'm a quarterback, I want to play for Ryan Day. I want to play for Lincoln Riley. I want to play for Steve Sarkisian. I want to play for Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, no.
I know that, they'll all cut that and use that in recruiting, but that's the truth.
Yeah, no, those are the four guys I would, I think Lane Kiffin's a guy I would consider.
Lane, yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Although they lost last week.
I know. Well, I think Kentucky's okay. Gave Georgia fits. So watch that one.
They did. I like Mark Stoops.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Good seeing you.
You as well. Another good hair day. You are just killing it.
Wife likes it short. Uncle Colin does not.
Uncle Colin.
I watched Nick Wright. He looks like a hipster from the 60s, a beatnik, and I kind of want to be part of the team.
You know what?
What?
You can clip this and you can show it to him. Nick, cut your hair.
I think he looks very cool. This is
It doesn't happen overnight.
That's right. Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.